world. And in fact, this is number 7 of our forums, which is just overwhelming to me in terms of, I can't believe we're here already and we're in November. And John and I have, we called each other and said, what are you wearing? We wanted to make sure it was equally clashy. So we've done our best to put on loud Christmas outfits to celebrate this, to kick the season off.
Now, just to say, sorry,
yes,
Kurt, just
please,
to interrupt
no,
on this Christmas sweater. This is billed as the not so ugly Christmas sweater. I'll encourage you to look up wearitforward.ca, Canadian company. Young woman created this. I saw it on Dragon's Den, ordered a sweater. This was a couple of years ago, and I think it's not so ugly. I'm just going to say. $5 goes to Children's Hospital Foundation.
Look at you working it already, eh? 2 minutes in and he is already serving other people. What was that URL again, John?
Wearitforward.ca.
Wearitforward.ca. You've heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Your gifting problems have been solved thanks to Mr. Borthwick. Let's jump in because we want to be really respectful of everyone's time. And we'll make sure that we finish by 12. And again, good morning and so great to see all of you, some new and familiar faces. As we're settling in, I'm going to do our usual introductions and acknowledgements. As we're settling in, the question I'm going to post to us today for some quick reflections before we get into our conversation is, how has COVID changed your relationship with the word service? How has COVID changed your relationship with the word service? If you got some thoughts on that, I encourage you to take some notes. We'll be checking back in with you on maybe some quick thoughts before we jump into our conversation with John. I think that's going to come up through his wisdom as well today. Before we jump in, a couple acknowledgements. Many of you have heard these before because they're both important. And the first is a land acknowledgement. And that's a reminder that before Canada was Canada, it was a community of thousands of strong, vibrant, resilient, and wise communities. And those communities have done their best to teach us how to steward our land, water, and air. And unfortunately, we have not done a very good job in listening to their knowledge. There are 1.7 beautiful people across our country, and that's a language I learned from our last forum speaker, Lack Deep, and I love that language. It does speak to their relationship with the land and with nature. And I think we just need to remind ourselves that our success today in community is literally built on top of these other communities. And we owe them a debt of gratitude, we owe them respect, and we owe them our time. In Canada, we also need to acknowledge that truth has to come before reconciliation. The second acknowledgement is a personal one. It's more a statement of fact. Again, you've heard this from me before. I was born white, male, middle class, in Southern Ontario in the 1970s. When you combine that with the fact that I'm happily married to my beautiful wife, Melanie, I check every box of privilege there is. And I'm very much, this journey that we're all on together is very much an exploration of that privilege and how I can best be using it to serve others. And I want to acknowledge the privilege, and that means that how I got to this screen today may have been radically different than many of yours. And so if I need to be held accountable on anything I say or do today, I encourage and welcome that feedback. I'm doing my best to be an ally, to support those, help others' voices sing as loud as mine is able to, just because of how I look or where I was born. So I welcome your feedback on that. Quick 101 on 4 simple words. Again, many of you have probably heard this before. I've made this confession before, and it's still kind of, I'm not sure how it can be true, but I turned 50 in March. I'm still grappling with that. And in turning 50, I wanted to share something with the world that has had profound impact on me at home, in the community, at work, as a leader, as a friend, as a partner. And it was some wisdom from my grandmother, Elsie, who at a very early age, when I was very young, shared with me 4 simple words. It's not about me. It's not about me. And as I say, they've profoundly impacted just about every aspect of my life since I've really started to embrace and understand what they mean. And that turned into this conversation and into a lifestyle, I hope, around servant leadership. And that was indeed part of this. I wanted to share this idea of servant leadership with the world in March. What I heard back was, Kurt, A for effort, this is great. Have you really thought about what this looks like when you layer in the privilege, quite frankly, that you bring to this conversation? So this journey that we're on, and I'm now going to call it life-changing because it has opened up my eyes and mind to so many great thoughts, and thanks to so many other really, really smart people. We're on this journey of repackaging this idea of servant leadership, taking the best of that, but putting it in context of what it looks like in a modern day world, grounding it in equity, because if it is not grounded in equity, it is not going to be true service to others. And that's one of my big takeaways. And so our journey that we're on now is figuring out how do we take the best of servant leadership and build something new out of that. And that's very much part of what these forums are. So I encourage you to join us at FourSimpleWords.ca. You can find all our social there. This will be number 7 of our forums that we have up on YouTube. I've got some blogging on there. The writing is, you know, depends on the day, but I encourage and welcome your feedback on that. And the big news I want to share today is that in early January, we're going to launch or release or share our initial thoughts, and I say ours because this has come from the community, on what this new model of leadership is going to be like. And so we're taking December to put some, give it a little bit more meat on some of the bones, and then we're going to share it with the world, get some feedback, and together we're going to build this new model of leadership that I know is going to impact you at home, in your community, and at work. Really quickly, just why these last 3 forums have been on faith. One of the major pushbacks we had in March was, Kurt, that's great, but the only people talking about servant leadership are white, male evangelicals. And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with being white, male, or evangelical. I want to be clear about that. But it seemed they were the only people having this conversation. So what we're doing together as a community is we are trying to figure out what service leadership looks like for everybody. And so this mini series on faith, and we've talked to someone from, we've talked to a Muslim, we've talked to a Sikh, and now we're talking to John, who's going to bring a Christian lens to this. It's a conversation around understanding these different faith traditions, finding a lot of commonality, to be honest with you, which is really exciting, and hopefully learning from one another. And just a reminder before we jump into our conversation, our guests, we're not asking our guests to be experts on their faith traditions at all. What they're doing is very graciously sharing their knowledge and their understanding of what their faith tradition means to them and how it's impacting their relationship with service. So we're not asking them to be held accountable or explain necessarily everything about their faith traditions, but they're empowering our conversation today with that lens. So that's how we got here. That's who we are. That's why we're spending some time together. Before I introduce John, does anyone want to jump in either in the chat? Let me just open that up, and or through turning off their mic. Anyone want to quickly share on how COVID has changed your relationship with the word service? You have any comments or feedback on how COVID has changed your relationship with service? Put up your hand, jump in the chat, no pressure. All right, we'll come back to that. The reason I ask is that our recent, my dialogues, which we'll chat about at the end, have really been inspired by the changes that COVID has brought to us as individuals and communities. And I think it's also changing our relationship with service. So I want to circle back to that. Let me introduce our very special guest today, who, full disclosure, is a good friend, is a good man, and I am proud to say that he is a part of my network, and that is Mr. John Borthwick. So I'm going to read a quick bio of John's, and then we're going to jump into our conversations. Again, questions, comments, always welcome in the chat. So John is a servant leader at home, at work, and in the community, and you're going to hear about all those 3 things today. John and his lovely wife, Kate, have 2 teenagers, which really says enough about how hard the guy's working, right? We've all been there. John has served as minister at St. Andrew's Presbyterian since 2003, and he's been the chaplain, and that's CHAPLAIN, just in case any of you are wondering how to spell that. Learned my lesson this morning. He's been the chaplain at Guelph Police Service for over 6 years. John is also the chaplain at the U of G Campus Police for the past 2. John has his BA in history from McMaster and his Master's of Divinity from Knox College at U of T. I'm going to give you a bit of background on some of what John's been doing recently, because I think it's going to have some real impact on our conversation. John holds a certificate in conflict management and congregational leadership from Conrad Gable, which is a college at Waterloo. And since joining the Guelph Police Services as their chaplain, and I should mention that's a volunteer gig, John is giving his time and energy as a volunteer there, which we'll circle back to. He's become trained in several crisis and mental health certifications, including mental health first aid, applied suicide intervention, skills training, and critical incident stress management. And in 2017, John became a certified community and workplace traumatologist. Hope I'm saying that right, John. Correct me if I'm not. Through the Traumatology Institute of Canada. So John has really taken a deep dive on what it means to be in service and trauma. And I think we're going to hear a little bit more about that from him today. If you're in Guelph, you know John well, because any community or group that is getting together to do something of good and of wellness, John's going to be there. And he's either there because he's put up his hand or they've asked him. And John brings a network, he brings a set of skills, and he brings a heart to everything that he does. And he leads through and because of his privilege. And I think that's a conversation that we'll be tripping into today. Just before we bring him on, I just want to read something from John's bio that I think really speaks to who he is and how he leads. So this is a direct quote from John. It is my privilege as the minister of St. Andrew's Guelph to come alongside, encourage, and celebrate the actions of local community leaders, doing good and impacting the lives of vulnerable people. It sounds cliche, but I feel called to the places where I believe Jesus would be found today. So with or without a faith lens, I think that sets us up in terms of how John leads, what's important to him, and where he's spending his time. Three other things I want to mention. He has a passion for football. Fair enough. It's a sport. I get it. Some people do. No judgment here, right? He loves craft beer. Yes, I think we can all check to that. And then there's this whole Shark Week thing, and it is truly a part of our relationship. I don't understand. If time allows, we may truly get to the bottom of John's passion for Shark Week. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm Four Simple Words welcome to the one, the only. You know him, you love him, ladies and gentlemen. It is John Borthwick. Look at all those. Look at all that applause. Look at that. Welcome, my friend.
Well, if I'm a little red, it's just my sweater, I hope. Thanks, Kurt. That was an amazing introduction. You certainly have a gift for being loquacious, my brother. Way to go. Way to go.
It comes from a place of love and admiration, my friend.
It's right back at you. We don't want to turn this into that sort of love-in show. I mean, I think people want to have a chance to talk and get into this stuff. So let's go. Let's go.
What's more entertaining than two white guys talking about privilege, really?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot more entertaining if we haven't learned that yet. So thanks, Kurt, for the awesome introduction. I just wanted to start off by a little acknowledgement of my own as well. I do appreciate that you say that our friends that are from various faith communities don't speak for the specific faith that they tend to hang out with. That's certainly true of me. I can't speak for all Christians in the world. And the way I describe it is I think there's a variety of streams within the tradition that I hang out with. And I happen to hang out in a specific part of the stream. And for others, they have different perspectives. So you'll find a great diversity within the Christian tradition. And certainly some of the things I might say today, some Christians might appreciate and value, and others might just pray for the salvation of my soul that I don't burn in hell. And I appreciate that. You know, we need everything we can get from all of our brothers and sisters. I think the way I would start is, since Christianity tends to be a bit of a trigger word for some folks.
Right.
I think we do have lots to answer for. I think we have a lot to confess. I think there's a lot of things that having this country colonized by people who followed a particular way of understanding the Christian faith has had a traumatic impact on the peoples who were here before. And probably it was beautifully said by an Indigenous woman who I was a part of a conference with. We've been colonized in the same way. Anybody who lives in this country has been colonized by traditionally a pretty Christian perspective on how we understand family systems, how we understand the systems that provide leadership, how we're governed, all those kinds of things. It's just, it's in the DNA, it's in the It's in the air. It's everywhere.
Right,
And
right.
hopefully we're trying to decolonize from it and, shake ourselves free from some of those things and relearn some stuff.
Well said. And I think, maybe, and that's a great place to start a conversation around the complexity of the word, right? So I'm wondering, can you talk to us about, as a Presbyterian minister, what is your relationship with the word service or servant? Like, talk to us a bit about that.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, the simplest way to understand a Christian, the way I try to unpack it, is it's somebody who follows someone that's called the Christ. So there's a guy named Jesus. We believe he hung out in the world for a time, a couple thousand years ago. He was called the Christ, the anointed one, the Messiah, the one that people were waiting for, the one that was going to change everything. And depending on your understanding of Christianity, or depending on your understanding of any of this faith stuff, he within different traditions, he's valued as a prophet. He's valued as someone, a great thinker, a great leader. And for Christians, they believe that he had a little more than that, that he was the Son of God, that he was the Messiah, that he was the one. If you take some of that baggage away and just go with this Jesus guy, the way I like to look at this Jesus person is to say, as I understand it, it's to believe in something bigger than ourselves, a divine being, that Jesus shows us in the Gospels, within the sacred text of the Holy Bible, demonstrate this is how what the divine would do if the divine put on skin and walked among us and was like us. So to try and follow his example, to try and emulate Jesus, to try and follow him, and knowing that with all the flaws that I have, that's what I try to do. And so some of the things that that this Jesus said and spoke about in a kind of almost a Ricky Bobby kind of style from Talladega Nights, if you're not first, you're last.
That's awesome.
He said something a little different. The first shall be last and the last shall be first was one of his lines. And he talked a lot about servant, being a servant. Whoever wishes to be great should be a servant. And then he lived it. He died for it. He put it all on the line, like poured his whole self out so that others could benefit and be served. And what's fascinating about that is he died for that. In a sense, he was considered a radical, a revolutionary, a threat to the system, a threat to the status quo, a threat to the religious institution of his day that he was a part of, Judaism. He didn't replace Judaism. He just came, he says himself, he came to, sort of come to bring all this together in some way.
Right.
But the message he preached was things like love your neighbor, pray for your enemies, forgive one another, do mercy and seek justice, that everybody's included. And that's what he was killed for. So I try, as limited as I am, to be a reflection of that, to be an example of service, to try and improve the lives of others, leaving the world a little better than I found it, trying to be a support to others who try to do the same thing, whether they're Christian or anything, no faith connection, no spiritual connection. Because what I find in this community that I've served for almost 20 years, there are so many people that are just like, I truly believe in, and one of the Christian things that we've got in the back of our heads is this idea that you're born somehow bad. There's this original sin thing, right?
Yeah, right.
And for me, and research actually shows this, in some research that I like to lean into, we're born to be good. Like the general the general stance of most human beings is a desire to be moved with compassion for other people. And I just want to come alongside that in whatever way I can for people who are, devoting their whole lives to trying to take care of people, but aren't connected to a faith community or something like that. That's not who I am. I often say I don't wear Team Jesus t-shirts and I don't give them out. So I'm happy just to support and spread the love as much as I can.
Because there's incredible high expectations or high standards set by this idea that, and I think this is some of the pushback we heard early on in this conversation about servant leadership, is if you draw a straight line back to this individual called Jesus, who died that is incredibly high expectations, right? And if we're unable to meet that, then A, I probably don't want to die, and B, that puts extreme pressure on this word servant, I think. And I think
Hmm.
that's one of the real challenges that this model currently has right now. Does that resonate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it speaks to, some of the area that I've been interested in supporting and learning about, and then sort of offering some thoughts and wisdom into is the people who serve other people. Whether
Right.
that's in counseling or taking care of people who've gone through trauma, all those sort of areas. Hanging out with Jesus is not helpful if you buy into that mindset. So if I say, I'm tired, I don't have any more to give, or this is hard, the stigma or the background that I have would say, oh, but look at Jesus, you need to give it all. You need to just pour out
Right.
everything.
Right. Yeah.
And
Right.
you're not
Yeah.
doing it right. You're not doing it right if you're not. So
Yes.
as someone
Yeah.
who tries to advocate some level of balance, whether that's through the week or over a year or whatever, finding the things that can fill you up to keep doing what you do is incredibly valuable, incredibly important. It's not about, and there's all those cliched lines like, you can't fill someone else's cup from an empty pitcher or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
You
Right.
don't go around, there's just a lot of those kind of things that we think, work harder,
Mhm.
give till it hurts.
Yeah.
I mean, those are all really unhelpful kinds of perspectives. And to throw it's almost, and excuse the phrase, I hope we can find a new one. Maybe Webster's can help us, but it's the ultimate trump card. um,
Right. Right.
a faith community or a faith lens might put down, as a minister, as a pastor, as a leader in a Christian community. It's like, no time is mine. Theoretically, you're
Mm.
supposed to serve
Right.
completely at the beck and call of your
Yes.
community and give as much as you possibly can. And if at the end of the day you've got nothing, well, then you're more like Jesus,
Right.
which isn't helpful.
Which,
And
yeah.
just to really challenge that, that's not
Yeah.
true of the story of Jesus. This is a guy who
Yes.
ran away into the mountains to get away from people. He's on borrowed time, like he's only got so much time, and yet he still found it important to get away, stay away from people. He left
Right.
communities, and the way the stories are told, he left communities where he was doing good and people were wanting to see him and needed him and wanted this and that, and he moved on. He didn't stay in one place
Mm.
forever and do those kind of things. So
Right.
you got to demystify some of the stuff that we've been, we've layered onto all this kind of stuff.
And that comes back to that privilege privilege and power conversation around just how the Christian faith has impacted, this North American world that we're living
Yeah.
in today, right?
Yeah.
And we've had a bit of a chat about that. And I want us to go back to what your lessons that you've learned by working with GPS, but I think I want to stay here for a second around what are some of those. Can you give us some other examples of maybe expressions that we're
Yeah.
using today
Mhm.
that have that Christian faith lens to it and are being used one way, but in their original context meant something completely else? There's a couple here that just blew me away. So what can
Yeah,
you
for
share with us
sure.
there, John? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the ones that, and again, there's a diversity of opinion. Anytime you take a sacred text, whether it's the Holy Bible, the Quran, or any kind of sacred text, everybody's got an interpretation. If anybody ever tells you from whatever sacred text it is, and especially Christians, if they tell you, we just looked at the Bible and the Bible told us exactly the way to think, then they're not doing their work. Because everybody comes at a set of words in a certain way and are impacted and influenced in a certain way. So the one that I find the most powerful, and I think it does speak to this equity piece a little bit, or at least shakes this piece around how we interpret stuff and who's interpreting it and who
Yeah.
benefits from how it's interpreted, or who benefits from the perspective.
Good.
So the one that
Yeah.
you hear all the time in this area of servant leadership is, you need to turn the other cheek. You need to, if someone takes your coat, you got to give them the shirt off your back. You got to go that second mile. You know, we're second mile people here. Come on, you can go that second mile. None of those stories are anything to do with how we've interpreted them. And this is where the Jesus guy kind of flips these things. So turn the other cheek. Someone hits you on the right side of your face, and I can never do left, right, this side of my face. Then you're supposed to give them the other side. Well, wouldn't it be interesting to know that in the Roman culture, you hit people with one hand. You did this other hand was used for kind of dirty things. That's why it's called the sinister, the left hand, that sinister hand. This is the stuff you did bathroom things with or something. I don't know. It's very weird. Anywho, but on this hand, this is the hand for hitting. And if someone's beneath you, a servant, a slave, an oppressed Jewish person in Jesus' day, you hit them with the back of your hand to show your power and your authority over them. So they hit you, and they hit you on the right side of your cheek. Jesus says, turn the other cheek. Well, last time I checked, it is incredibly difficult to hit someone if they turn their face with the back of your hand on the other side. So what's Jesus saying? Jesus is saying that if they hit you one way, force them to hit you the other way, but the only way to do that would be to hit someone, and typically with a closed fist, you'd have to punch them for the left cheek. If someone punched someone with the left cheek, that is equals. Like you hit people, you're equal this way. So it disrupts it. Someone takes your coat, give them your tunic or your shirt as well. Well, in Jesus' day, they wore two pieces of clothing. They wore a coat and a tunic, at least the dudes did. So someone takes your coat, okay, give them your tunic as well. Well, what happens? You're naked. Well, in our culture, we'd be like, oh, that's so embarrassing. Now you're naked. Well, wouldn't it be interesting to know that in Jesus' day, if you're naked and someone has forced you to become naked, that person is where the shame is held. So now this person, if you can imagine it, is saying, no, stop being naked. Here's your shirt back. Put your shirt on. Ugh. And so he disrupts it, right? Second mile. In Roman times, as oppressors, as the power, as the empire, they were great. You can still find them today. They created these mile markers. So a Roman soldier, if he came along to someone he was oppressing or had conquered, let's say a Jewish community in Jesus' day, he would say, here, they carried these big packs. Maybe they were 50 pounds, maybe they were 100 pounds, who knows exactly. And they would give them to this person, and they would say, hey, you, carry my pack. Okay. Like, what are you going to do? He could kill you. So you carry the pack. The rule was, and the Romans were great at rules, the rule was you could only compel someone to carry your pack for 1 mile. Jesus said, go the second mile. So what happens? Comes up to the mile marker, and the Roman's like, okay, Jew, give me back my pack. No, it's okay, I got it. No, give me back my pack. You know, like, you're done, we've done the mile. No, it's fine, I'm good. This is fine, it's light, no big deal. Now you have a picture of a Roman soldier begging the oppressed person, the Jewish person in Jesus' day, begging him to give back his pack. So where's the power? The power is all of a sudden disrupted. Is he doing anything wrong? No, not necessarily. But who's in the wrong now? The Roman. Because if his superior found out or saw that he was compelling a Jew to carry his pack 2 miles, he would be in trouble. So it blows up this equity stuff. Right. And this is all through this sort of story and tradition. We've taken these little pieces and said, this is one way of layering this on people. Yeah. But none of this was even meant for that. So I think it's really important that we shake some of this. And the biggest question I always ask around the equity lens is, who does it benefit? Yeah. If I want to use this text and say, you need to go the second mile, well, who does that benefit? If you want to, turn of the century Protestant work ethic, again, something to apologize for the Protestants at least, once the Industrial Revolution is coming, you're now having preachers telling people on a Sunday morning, perhaps, you need to go the second mile. Well, who's in the room? Both the owners of the factories and the workers. Right. And they're saying it is your Christian duty to work hard and go the second mile for someone. Well, that's
Oh my
great.
gosh.
Like,
Yeah.
that's just wacky, right? And so it's all about who benefits and all those kind of things.
Oh, so much there to unpack, John. It's so good. I love those practical examples. And I really, John and I chatted last week, and when I heard them, it was like, context is so important. What can we take away from the power of context here, John, in terms of being in service to others today? Like, what are some of those lessons that we can take from this idea that this Jesus figure is literally teaching? What are some of those takeaways we can have for serving others today?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the pieces in all this is, when you think about context, it's about, so much of my tradition has been about, we have the right answer and we know the right way of thinking.
Yes, right.
And our job apparently is to make sure that everybody else can get to that right space. It's fascinating that the person we follow speaks about being humble, speaks about, if you're invited to dinner, don't take the front, like the head table as your position, sit at the back. And if someone invites you to come forward, then that would be lovely. But somehow we turned it into, this is we own this place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so from a context perspective, I think in my tradition, and I think what can be helpful sometimes, is to remind oneself of where we're sitting or how we got into a room. For me, that's been a big part of my thing. How did I get in this room? And then if I'm in this room, what's my purpose here? It is very easy for me to slip into, because I'm white and male and cisgendered and the whole society is designed for me. It's very easy for me to sort of go, this is my space. Everyone wants to hear what I think.
Right.
Certainly this Zoom call itself even helps me to affirm me in that. But you've asked me to speak, so I'm just doing this. You told me I had to. So maybe we need to think about, I don't need to speak first. Or if I'm going to use my privilege, I'm going to use it to make sure that somebody else gets a chance to speak. Or I need to listen more, or I need to not be as reactive. How I use myself in the context that I serve, I try to go around and connect with people who are doing good and striving for justice and trying to make a difference, and just listen and provide a safe space for them to just, like, I don't know, sometimes people think of me as a little bit of a priesty thing or whatever it is. You say stuff to me, it just gets locked in this old brain of mine. But sometimes as leaders, you need a place to rant and rave and vent and say those kind of things like, I do everything for these people. I work so hard every single day. I get nothing. I get no appreciation. I get no recognition. There's no award for what I'm doing. And sometimes people need a space to just sort of say that, and because they can't say that in the other spaces they're in, because they would be like, oh wow, I thought you were a servant. I thought you were doing things for the people. It's not about awards. But sometimes you need to be a safe place to say that, and then you can recalibrate and get back to, I know that's not what I do this for, but thanks for listening. Thanks for creating that space.
And isn't that a reminder of the power of the humanity, right? And this has come up in a lot of my conversations the past 6-7 weeks through our dialogues, the importance and power of humanity, that there is a tipping point. No matter how much I want to give or serve, how much I want to help, I gotta just vent. I gotta be, I am human, right? Unlike this deity that people are calling Jesus, I got a limit. And I think there's a real power there to acknowledging our limits, and to your point, finding spaces where we can vent and we can share. So I just want to celebrate that. I'm conscious of our time, and I want to
let's get people in.
Shift. I want to, if you've got any questions for John, I encourage you to throw them into the chat. Does anyone want to ask John any questions at this point? I'd like to hear more about his work that he's doing with police services. Does anyone have a question for John, just based on what he shared with us so far? Put up your hand or drop it in chat. I'll keep an eye on that. If you do have something, by all means, please jump in. Would love to hear your thoughts and comments. And maybe, John, let's build on that context experience that you shared with us, the power of being in the room. And actually, the one thing I do want to do is I want to acknowledge John and I have sat on many committees together, and I knew he was a brother from another mother when I've seen him repeatedly in committee meetings using his privilege to empower others. And that's just a very simple act of people saying, you know, who's got something to say. John will put up his hand and the speaker, or sorry, the chair will say, yeah, John, what are your thoughts? Almost always first, right? Being who he is and the privilege that he brings to the room. And John doesn't say anything except, I think so-and-so had a point she wanted to make. And I've seen John use his privilege and be a good ally in meetings like that so many times and use that. So I wanted to acknowledge and celebrate that, John. And for those of us that have that same privilege as John, that's a really simple, easy way that we can be. And I know many, when I look at the people on this call, we're already doing that, but that is a really powerful way for us to be using that privilege to be serving others. So, John, I want to segue into some of your learnings that you've had and some of the amazing giving you've done in serving those who serve us, first responders. And you've done some amazing work at Guelph Police Services and now on campus at University of Guelph. Talk to us a bit about, like, what have you learned from walking alongside those serving others about service?
Yeah, I mean, I think if anything, what it demonstrates, and you know, policing for sure is undergoing a whole sort of rethink around a societal rethink for sure. And you know, I had one guy say to me, you know, I got invited in to be the chaplain essentially way back when Chief Larkin was around, and somebody in the community said to me, well, yeah, that's obvious. And I'm like, what do you mean that's obvious? Well, of course you'd get invited. Well, I wasn't really getting it in that moment. They're like, well, look at you. I'm like, oh, you look like them. Oh yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. Well, yeah, of course.
Right.
So yeah, and certainly this year, I've had colleagues, I've had friends who've said, I don't know how you can stand with those people anymore.
Right.
So it's an interesting relationship, and I still internally go through a variety of gymnastics within myself. I've come to know, and you know, in the term I use often is you know, I love people in a Jesus kind of way, because sometimes people are hard to love, and you know, I need a little help. But I would say that, you know, over my 6 years of hanging out with Guelph Police, I've come to love the people there. Their job is difficult and challenging.
Right.
Many of them serve very dutifully and willingly. They came into the whole, I mean, I have my world of being a minister. The typical line is, why'd you become a minister? Well, I want to help people. Almost every police officer I've ever heard, I want to help people. I want to do something. Right. I want to help people contribute.
There's a true calling there, isn't there?
It is a bit. There's a lot of similarities in some ways, except I don't get to carry a gun, you know, and that's probably a good thing. And you know,
thing, yeah.
We may also be, you know, hopefully Guelph Police aren't fully listening to this, but you know, we may also be at a place where some of them might not need to carry guns to do the certain roles that they do, but that's a bigger conversation.
Yeah.
All in all, I think it's what I see in policing in general, and I'm not speaking specifically about Guelph Police and first responders like paramedics and firefighters, is we have not done a good job. It's a similar kind of thing I was talking about earlier. We've not done a good job to recognize the toll that job takes, and the impact that has on their lives, and the doubling down of that impact when things like this year happen related to understanding their role and you know, all that kind of stuff. So it is an incredibly draining job that has led to lots of sadly people dying by suicide, tragically relationship breakdowns, and just, you know, addictions and all sorts of tragic horribleness. My lens on it, I'm a six-year amateur, but my lens on it is, if we took care of the people who serve us very, very well, we might have less negative interactions with members of the public, and we would all be better for it. It would just be a better way of being. If you are tapped out, if you've got nothing left in the tank, if everybody you interact with is a negative interaction in your brain, if everything, all this trauma that's filled your brain is just sort of twisted everything you see in the world, you're going to have negative interactions. And their culture has always said, suck it up. This is just the way the job is. And I think it's changing. And I hope part of the change will be we have a better lens on how we take care of these people. So one of the things I do there with another police member who's trained in Eastern meditation and Qigong therapies and things like that. He's a practitioner and also a Guelph police officer. Him and I do a little mindfulness and resilience training for all the brand new recruits. And these young, sponge-like minds are taking some of that in. And also this younger generation is saying, I've heard the profession is difficult and I need the resources to help keep myself balanced. And if people were more mindful at what they were doing, if they were more reaching out in compassion, what is happening with this person? They're being reactive. What's going on with that person? Could I be compassionate to them? You're going to think a lot more before you just react, because so much of their training is based on teaching them how to react to something. And and it becomes a muscle memory. There needs to be some disrupting to say, let's get in that brain a little more. Let's think a little more before you need to do just what you do, because that's what you've been trained to do.
And so how do we and maybe starting with a police environment, and then maybe thinking bigger, how do we bake that into culture? Because again, this is a conversation that I'm being challenged with by a lot of people, is how do we build better cultures that embrace service with the full acknowledgement that there is only so much energy that you can give before you need to be recharged, whatever that recharging looks like for you. And I think there's some opportunity here. There's a need, and that's, I guess, / opportunity around building cultures that acknowledge that energy flow. And we have to do a better job at normalizing that. So any thoughts on how we do that? I mean, based on your experience with the services.
I'd love to hear from others if anybody's got some great ideas related to that. I mean, I don't, I think that's the work we all need to be doing, to think. I mean, it's basically about being, I call it, and it's not, I don't brand it, it's out there. We all need to do our own work. Like, we need to know who we are. It's, for me, it's always that idea of, where do I end and someone else begins, right? I need to get a sense of, this person is being reactive or coming at me in a certain way.
Right on. Yeah.
That, I've said to you before, your line is a line I've used for a long, long time in the role I have, because I've used it as a mantra to keep me grounded when someone's coming at me with some kind of negativity within my own community. We made a decision and people don't like the carpet color, and now they're coming at me with all sorts of anger. And I'm like, this is about carpets. This isn't about me. There's something deeper going on. And so I think all of our interactions as human beings need to be we just need to be grounded in our own selves, breathe a little or more, and just have a sense that there is actually another human being here. Just stop being as reactive to everything that comes our way, I think. But I'd love to hear what other folks have to say.
Let's, questions, comments from anyone. Any questions or comments for John?
Kurt, can I speak?
Please, Dave. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks very much. So thanks to both of you for the conversation so far. I'd be fascinated to hear from, not with calling out names, but from Shakiba, Sandra, and Bev, because there's a lot of white male faces on this Zoom so far. And I think we all acknowledge perhaps that there is a privilege that has come with that historically, and we're all trying to maybe change that moving forward. It's interesting, as I've been listening, I've been ruminating on the original question, which was COVID changing my relationship with service. And I didn't think that it had originally. I actually thought it was more age and maturity and opportunity and learning that had changed my relationship with service over the past 8 months, 12 months, 24 months, whatever that time period may be. But I did write down a couple of thoughts as John was speaking. Not that I wasn't listening, John, but one word that really jumped out was patience. So I'm a guy, I love to put things on a list and knock them off that list and get them done. And I'm finding that COVID in so many ways is reducing that ability or delaying that ability. And if I can share a little bit of a personal story that's not personal to me, and it's too bad that Marva had to leave. I think about the Policing in School Task Force. My wife is a volunteer member of that group as a community member. And this week they applied for and asked for an extension to their findings to a presentation to the school board. And the reason they asked for that delay, and hopefully this stays within our little Zoom chat today, is because they hadn't had a great opportunity to hear from the students on their feelings of the police in school, the presence. And, you know, my wife and I were chatting over the past month or two and said that was really too bad. It was unfortunate. And they reconfigured their methodology of trying to reach that data from the students and have to redeliver it. It still hasn't been delivered at this point in time. Guelph Today puts a pretty good article out about the meeting and the fact that that delay was granted. And a lot of people responded without true information to say, well, why are we delaying? This is a student problem. There was comments that said, if these students aren't engaged, then we shouldn't bother to listen to them. And again, it's coming down to patience. I think people need to realize that, you know, it's a tough environment to get things done right now.
Right on. And good engagement takes time. And Marva, as an excellent practitioner she is, knows that. Really, I appreciate that, Dave. Thanks so much for sharing that. Let me open up to other comments or feedback. Shakiba, you've got something in the chat there. Would you like to speak to that? Yep.
Sure, and thanks to Dave for the call out on getting others to speak as well. And thanks, John and Kurt, for your for doing this, because actually it does require those in places of power and privilege to create the spaces to have these important dialogues. And every time you pass the baton over to others, you're doing the important work, and it needs to get done. It's really the only way to do it, is for these to feel like inclusive conversations. And as people in positions of leadership, it's our responsibility as servant leaders to have these conversations with our teams and our families, and be courageous enough to say this out loud more often, and in maybe more public forums. And so I just encourage myself now to say it out loud a little bit more, to be more vulnerable, and to be willing to call action out more frequently. So yeah.
Thanks, Shakiba. No one else like to jump in? Sandra, yes, my friend Sandra. So good to see you. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Dave, for the call out. And I'm probably in a much different situation than you are. I was a servant leader almost my entire career. I worked in technology for over 40 years. And so in that alone, I was a bit of a pioneer in certain sectors within the province. And, you know, just making sure that regardless of if I was the only woman in the room of 10 white guys, pardon me guys, but 10 white guys sort of thing, that, you know, for the most part, I gained respect through being able to either share my abilities or looking for some assistance along the way, and working cooperatively within a team. I always did maintain the mantra of we work together as a team, no one works for anyone else, and let's solve the problem together. So it's now with the COVID, I find I used to be a big community volunteer. I'm a little compromised, so I can't get out there personally to help with that type of thing. And so from that perspective, what do you do? Well, maybe you participate a little bit more in providing financial, if you are financial support to people or community groups or what have you. And also wherever, just kind of join into something like this. And you know, Kurt and I have certainly had many discussions about leadership and different types of leadership over the time that we did work together. So that's, you know, primarily where I've been coming from.
Well said, Sandra. And you are such a great leader, and you are such a great servant leader. Can I ask you to reflect on Sandra, on this idea? How do we build cultures that embrace service better? And maybe that, and that's a big one. But I've seen the teams you've built and they've worked so well. Like, how do we do that? How do we ramp that up?
Well, first and foremost, I think we're seeing this with how our politicians are handling the COVID situation. You've got to ensure you know what your message is going to be. It's got to be clear. It's got to be concise. It's got to have a purpose in terms of what your overall goal is going to be. And then it's basically selling it. You're sort of as a leader or a manager, you're a salesperson, right. Or you could be a technician one day if it was my case, or whatever. But it's the whole idea about the effective communication. And that narrowing that gap, closing those holes, and really kind of keeping it in simple language so that anybody can understand your direction and which way you're going. And I think then it's easier for people to jump on the wagon and go along with you.
Yeah. Excellent. Well said.
And if I can jump in there, I think what Dave and John may have said earlier about the idea of pausing and how important that is, and taking a minute to reflect and do that mirror work for a little bit, because you really have to walk the walk on this one before you can talk it. So
awesome. Yeah, Shakiba, well said. Peter, I saw your hand there, please.
Yeah, I'm probably going to practice that adage that, it's better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak up and remove all doubt. But I'm like David. I'm a newbie on the program, and John, I really enjoy it. It's very nice to meet you again and to hear from you. Thank you very much for that, and Kurt for organizing these. And I'm probably doing this because I'm a coward and we're about to get off. But at some point, I just wonder, have we actually ever unpacked this word privilege? Because that word really bothers me. It really does. And in the context of John's, tremendous examples about turning the other cheek and the use of, the whole use of language. Because to me, the word privilege somehow implies that anybody who is not us is somehow lessened or weakened because they're not as we perceive ourselves to be. And I remember this vividly at St. Ignatius, a seminar where we were talking about poverty. And there was a lady from a very small village in Africa who was clearly, extremely impoverished and had come to Canada to try and make a better life. And she talked about what life was like in her village, and the incredible blessings and benefits that she'd accrued from being part of a very small community that had to be self-reliant, that had no money, that was all Black, were victims of everything. And yet she said, I consider myself immensely privileged to have come from this background. The point being, I think the very use of the word implies that other people are in some way less than us because we're white and male and old and whatever it is, wealthy, etc. And that just worries me. If there's that privilege category, I definitely fall into it, but I consider myself to be fortunate and to be very lucky, but I don't consider myself in any way privileged. And somehow I feel that if you want to be a servant leader, to John's point, maybe we need to stop beating ourselves up about being quote unquote privileged.
Right.
Maybe we need to give ourselves a break about that because we're not privileged and we are very lucky. And we, as a result, have not had to suffer and struggle with the things that many other races and groups have had to struggle with. So maybe that's a future conversation.
Yeah.
And in the context of John's really, how language over time gets abused and messed up, maybe that's just something for us to tuck away and think about another time. I think it's been a wonderful conversation, John. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot, so thank you. But I would just put that on the table maybe for some other time.
Absolutely, Peter, brilliant. And
I really
Okay, settle
appreciate
in,
that.
everybody.
Yeah.
We're in for this for like 2 weeks. All right, let's get this solved. It's a beautiful reflection, Peter, and I want to celebrate that. And not having the answer, of course, and share that it is a heavy word for myself as well. And yeah, I think maybe let's have a deeper dive on that, because I think where you're coming from there, Peter, and knowing you so well, is that it's coming from a place of genuine wanting to make connection. And for me, the privilege piece is acknowledging that, my journey just getting here was different, and not so better or worse, but it's that difference. And I think I'm hearing from people that acknowledgement is part of that understanding that our journeys are different, and that I've got some responsibility that comes from my boat being as strong as it is, as opposed to someone else. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but that's John. Do you want a quick reflection? Yeah, please. And then I want to please, John, go ahead, John.
Yeah, so I mean, I really appreciate that, Peter, and thanks for that. I think it is. I think there is incredible value in how we use words and how we reflect on those.
Mm-hmm.
Most recently, I was challenged through social media, which is great, in reading someone talking about the use of the word vulnerable. So we use the word vulnerable populations, vulnerable people, and this little tweet, and thank you for this little tweet that came from the universe, sort of pushed that out and said, if we keep using that, I think it speaks to what you're talking about, Peter. We're putting down people, like somehow I'm a vulnerable person, and that somehow means I'm weaker, and was sort of celebrating and acknowledging the strength of people who we've labeled vulnerable. And if you speak about language, again, leaning into my tradition, the Jesus guy uses the words, the least of these. And to use that phrase, the least, if he's going for an equity lens, it's not very helpful to sort of say, well, these ones are on the lower people, and we're somehow the privileged better people. So I appreciate how we need to unpack our language. The only thing I would say in these conversations that I'm learning constantly is we need to spend less time getting stuck in specific definitions of words. Remind ourselves as well that if we're disrupted by a word, that's our own work to be doing, not to be telling someone else, please don't use that word. I don't like that word, because we see those conversations writ large, where all of a sudden we my people, us white dudes, we are often the ones who sort of go, ooh, I don't like you saying that about me. Well, that's my own work. Like, I need to, again, pause, be ready to listen, feel uncomfortable, sit with it, and process it on my own time. Do not take the time in a group of people or in a conversation that's trying to get to a next step in working on definitions of words. I mean, that's for the government to do when they write policy, and good luck to them, because that goes on forever. So anyways, yeah.
Right.
But thanks for that, Peter. Thanks for that.
Very good point.
And I am such a great conversation, and I want to be really respectful of our time.
Absolutely.
So maybe I'm going to grab the comments there. Not that we've solved that at all, of course. I know there's lots more to say, but I think we've got some conversations for the new year, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
So I really appreciate that. That is almost our time. How about a round of applause and a genuine thanks to the one, the only, the lovely, talented Mr. Borthwick for starting our conversations today. John, you are wise, you are kind, and you are smart, and I am grateful for your friendship and the leadership that you've brought to our conversation today. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. I want to thank you. Oh, please.
Could I just offer? Oh, thank you, Shakiba. That's very kind. Could I just offer, because my privilege says I need to, just my last little call to action. One line or two lines. As you guys lead and pour yourselves out, remember to replenish yourselves. Find those places that you can get lifted up, whether that's watching Shark Week or drinking a craft beer, spending time with family and friends if you can, virtually, or whatever that looks like. Because leading people, inspiring people, caring for people would be much easier if it didn't involve people. And unfortunately it does. And so find those things that sustain you now more than ever. And if you ever feel guilty or selfish for taking some time to tend to yourself, try to remind yourself that it's okay, that I need this if I want to keep doing the good work that I do. So
Yeah.
that's my little call to action and encouragement to you. Wrap us up, Kurt.
Thank you, sir. Those are great words to finish up on. Thanks to John. Thanks to you all for being a part of this. I cannot tell you the gift of your sharing and your time and what that means to this journey. In December, we're going to have a special recorded edition of our forum, which we're going to post for people to have a look at, because I know schedules are going to get busy. And I want to plant the seed that big things are coming in January, and it's going to be a conversation around how are we going to repackage this idea of servant leadership, grounded in this very conversation that we're having today. So I am just so grateful for the learning and the insights you've shared. Thanks to my good friend Delbert for running the technology today. Yay, Delbert. He's going to get this posted on Facebook for us, so thank you for that, my friend. And finally, final pitch to join us at FourSimpleWords.ca. Follow us on social. I would love to have a dialogue with everyone on this call today, and I have had a number of dialogues with you. If you haven't yet organized a dialogue, FourSimpleWords.ca/dialogues. It's an hour one-on-one chat where we can have deep dives like this. So I would be grateful for your time and insights that way. My friends, thank you. I am so grateful for your time today. I wish you a great Friday afternoon, an excellent weekend as well. And I look forward to seeing you again at FourSimpleWords.ca soon. So with that, I'll say thanks to everybody. Enjoy your afternoons. Thanks, everyone.